Hello there and welcome. We are live and this is the Smart Building series. Just want to welcome everybody. And today we are talking about how data will facilitate your office reentry strategy. And I'm very happy to have Dan Ryan from VergeSense with us today. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm doing great, Jim. Growing out my
Good.
pandemic haircut. How about yourself?
Nice. Yeah, no, same. And yeah, we've got a really great discussion, I think, here today, talking about practical strategies and tactics that companies can deploy as they prepare to get back to the office, which seems to be gathering pace now, which is great news for everybody. Just a few things from me. First thing, a bit of housekeeping, and then I'm going to ask Dan to introduce himself and VergeSense as well, so you guys can get a sense of what they're doing. And also just to say, we want to make this an interactive session. So if you've got any questions for us, please type them in. I think you will find that there is a Q&A button. If you click on that, you'll be able to send us some questions, type them in, and we'll be able to take them as we go along. Other than that, like what we've got planned for today, beyond the intro, is then to talk or start talking about the impact on workspaces and preparing for the transition. And then after that, more about transitioning back and how that's going to work. And then finally, what will the post-COVID workplace look like? So yeah, without further ado, Dan, tell us about yourself and VergeSense, please.
Sure. Yeah. And let me, I will take over and go into presentation mode and share my
Please
screen.
do.
So yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks for jumping in, and thanks to Jim for hosting. My name is Dan Ryan, and I'm with VergeSense. And basically, what we're going to do today is I'm going to start off, just give a little background on the company, talk a little bit about one component of our product, which is our sensor hardware. I'm going to go through that and showcase some of the data that we're able to collect. Then we're going to kick it back for questions, and then I'm going to come back and highlight some of the specific tools that we've been developing around using occupancy data and people count data to help companies in the return to work strategies. Obviously a huge topic of conversation right now. What I'll say is like the main thing that we've been thinking through and having a lot of dialogue with customers is around sort of the so what. So, we have the ability to generate a lot of rich, useful data about what's happening in the environment. But the real question is sort of how does that data actually integrate with workflows around it and actually help customers during that return to work strategy. So we'll sort of talk specifically about actual anecdotes that we're hearing from customers and clients about how data is being used, and then how data is being used to actually drive that return to work strategy. So jumping right in, just kind of brief overview on the company. So we've been around about 3 years now, globally deployed. I think we're in about 20 countries now, tens of thousands of sensor products all over the world in a variety of different regions. And from a product perspective, sort of the core of what we do is we have a people counting sensor platform. These devices are typically ceiling mounted. The data they collect is 100% anonymous. What we do is we get a count of how many people are detected within the vicinity of the sensor. We also get distance information as well, so we can tell how close people are standing together, which is data that's sort of quite relevant now. And then from a form factor perspective, we have both wired sensor options for sort of mostly new construction type of scenarios, and then we also have a battery powered sensor option that installs really quickly and easily, and I'll show sort of an example of that shortly. From a data perspective, we have the ability to deploy the products sort of on an on-prem network, and then also get data back to the cloud over a cellular backhaul via gateway device. So oftentimes that creates something that can be deployed really rapidly, really quickly. And then an analytics tool, which we'll show some examples of later on, and then APIs for funneling this data into a whole bunch of third-party systems, both traditional IWMS and room booking type systems, and now there's a lot of discussion around using occupancy data for cleaning scheduling, cleaning management, ticketing, that sort of thing. So that's been sort of pulled into scope as well. And the main theme of all this is that we try and maintain a lot of agility. So we really want to be able to roll this product out very quickly. We've done it at scale with a number of organizations, and sort of this new reality, we've sort of been pulled forward in terms of the pace that people want to deploy and scale up product. So having something that's really flexible, simple, easy has been something that we've had a real focus on as a company since the beginning. So diving in, this is like a super cool video. Let's see if the video actually works. But yeah, what this is actually showing exactly how the product gets installed. And that's it. Yeah, it's that simple. Very, very, very cool. But basically, the product has a magnetic mounting system on the back. So for most ceiling types, we have sort of drop ceiling. It literally is as simple as that, seconds to get the physical product installed. You're able to get data flowing right away, and then as that data gets aggregated, from conference rooms, from spaces in the floor, you'll sort of get higher level analytics reporting and alerting in as little as a week. So designed for that, really rapid, quick installation type scenario.
Dan, I had a question come in for you.
Sure.
Asking how long the battery lasts on that device.
So we target 2-year battery life with the product.
Okay.
And then in terms of the actual data, so typically these are mounted in sort of open desk areas or within sort of enclosed spaces like meeting rooms, conference rooms, et cetera. And then the two sort of bits of data we get are a count. So we know exactly sort of how many people are sort of within that space. And then we also get actually distance between those folks. So and sort of, but both those data points are available in APIs as well as in sort of our reporting and analytics tool. So, obviously there's a lot of new use cases that have emerged. A lot of companies are thinking about limiting the occupancy of conference rooms. So we have the ability to say how many people are within a room. Is it sort of exceeding, your that room's target capacity as people think about return to work? And then also we have the ability to aggregate that data across many types of sensors. So looking at whole floors, zones and floors, and that sort of thing. I'll show some examples of that a little later on. And this is jumping sort of the sort of more COVID related capabilities, but this is showcasing the ability for the sensor to actually do sort of this distance type measurement. So because we have the distance between people within the field of view of the sensor, that's also additional data that we can aggregate and sort of report on. But with that, we'll sort of pause and then Jim, kick it over to you for sort of maybe going through some of these initial questions, and I think we have some polling questions for the audience as well.
Yeah, sure. Where am I? Let's have a look. Yeah, so we've had a couple of questions come in specifically about your product. Alerting is remote management and or in space. How do you how does alerting handled in your system?
Yeah, so from a learning perspective, I think I have a mock-up of this somewhere here. Yeah, so we have an alerting API basically. So we can both alert via our own tool with sort of an email style alert, or what's most common is to want to pull that data into a third-party alerting tool or ticketing tool. The main sort of question we always have with alerting is sort of what are you going to do around that alert? So we've been having a lot of dialogue with customers around Okay, if I detect a floor is above its sort of target occupancy level during the return to work strategy, what do I do with that? Or if there's a conference room that we're seeing an alert generated because there's too many people in that conference room. Most companies, I would say, aren't going to have like somebody on the floor that's going to break up the party, right, and actually go to that room and sort of and try and respond to that in real time. But the most common use case that we've been seeing from folks is this concept of an alert that would then be generated on a daily basis. And then if you're seeing a particular conference room that's seeing a lot of bad, called bad behavior, or a shared space that's seeing a lot of over occupancy events, somebody would actually go check that space out. And maybe you forgot to pull the chair out of the conference room, or maybe there was some signage required in that area to reinforce social distancing. So we think the alerts to drive sort of daily type of reporting is going to be the way most people consume it, as opposed to doing like that real time type alert. But we have the ability to do both.
Okay. I'll take, we've got quite a bunch of questions come in. Sorry guys if I don't get to do all of them. We'll try and do like 3 or 4 now, and then so we can move on to talk a bit more about the workspace transition and the COVID related stuff in a bit more detail. But let's do some now. Dan, next one for you is, can the people counting sensor tie into building automation systems to do HVAC or lighting control?
Yes, for the BMS piece, it's long been on the roadmap. Is sort of what I always tell people, a BackNet integration, and it's coming up a lot more in the forefront now. It's something we sort of always discussed. Hey, we want to build some sort of BackNet integration to tie into HVAC. But it's actually even more important now because there's such an emphasis on air quality and airflow within spaces. So that's something that we're looking at more deeply. We haven't actually built that integration yet, but presumably, you're getting a count, piece of count data, and that integration could be done. And we're hearing a lot more about that now.
Right. Yeah, with the air quality piece and stuff like that, isn't it? But I guess it also depends on which building automation lighting control system the person has, right? Depending on if you can interact with it or not. But
yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, for more legacy systems where there maybe isn't that capability available, probably more of a stretch. But for most of the sort of more modern systems with BackNet or IP,
then it's possible. Yeah. And another interesting question here. I understand the need for this going back to the workplace now, so this kind of use case, but was this really, what was this really used for before?
Yeah, it's a great question. I talk about all the time. So probably the best sort of view of this right here is, we've got the 2 red dots around the people sitting next to each other here. And then sort of in the pre-COVID world, there's a lot of use cases for this type of product, for agile workforce strategy, tying sensor data into desk availability, room availability, and the sort of picture you see here are people collaborating in the workplace, right? And the sort of the old metric for this was workplace collisions. You sort of we're trying to create those. Architects would talk about like we want ad hoc workplace collisions to happen within the environment, and now we want the opposite, right? It's all about social distancing and sort of maintaining lower occupancy levels in general. So it's been sort of a complete 180 in terms of how you use the data in that respect, and that's been pretty surprising, interesting transformation.
Yeah, and from our perspective, we wrote a report about occupancy analytics earlier this year, looking at the market and the vendors out there and trying to size what we think the market is worth at the moment, plus also, really looking at the use cases and, beyond what we're talking about here today, there's also, a load of stuff around trying to optimize the workplace, around room booking, around visitor management, And then, of course, the whole space utilization piece. Are you being as efficient as you can be with your space? Those are all things that companies were doing before COVID.
Exactly.
Let's take one more, Dan, and then we'll crack on with the rest of what we want to talk about. What distances do the devices cover, and if using multiple devices, how do you avoid double counting?
Yeah, it's a great question. So from a deployment perspective, the typical ratio is like 1 sensor per 8 desks when they're deployed above desks. And within conference rooms, 1 sensor for most rooms up to about a dozen people. And then, once you get above a dozen person capacity with traditional capacity measurement, you may require multiple sensors. But when the sensors are commissioned, we have a tool that basically, if there's areas of overlap between 2 devices, when the devices get commissioned, 1 sensor basically assumes responsibility for that area, so you don't double count people. And then the sensors will also synchronize, so they'll make sure they take a reading at the same time if there's an overlap between them. So you don't have a person that sort of moves in between those areas in between when each sensor fires off its reading. So we sort of we calibrate in both time and space to ensure that you don't get double counting.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, guys, we'll get on with part 2 now, and we'll definitely try and get to everyone's question. We've got plenty of time, I think. But of course, if we don't, or if there's any other anything that you want to ask, I'm sure we can work out a way to do that, maybe by email or something else after when we're offline. So in part 2 here, we wanted to talk about the impact on workplaces and this preparing for the transition back as well. And again, it'd be interesting to hear from you guys out there, like if you want to put this in the chat, about what the most challenging hurdles that you're dealing with at the moment in responding to this. But Dan, from your perspective, how have you seen COVID impact your clients and the way that they are operating at the moment, or the way they will be operating?
Yeah, so initially, right, it obviously it's been a very rapidly evolving scenario over the past 2 months. Initially, a lot of people were just trying to figure out how to shut down the office basically, and then have everybody work from home productively. So that was top of everybody's mind for the first month. And then once that was sort of sorted out, I think one surprising thing, and we talked about this recently, was that most companies, were sort of, very, very skeptical of work from home. And generally, there's a lot of skepticism at it. And then we ran a poll on a webinar I did a couple of weeks ago of, sort of how was work from home going for most people. And we saw 96% of those people said, better than expected, which was pretty shocking statistics. So a lot of people adjusted and calibrated really, really fast. And then sort of the question became, okay, how are we thinking about potentially returning to the office? And a lot of this stuff has been talked about and written a lot about recently, so I won't touch too much on it. But the sort of two main themes that we see now are folks thinking about some sort of staggered return, and that's pretty universal. Nobody's going to go back from 0 to 100%. It's mostly starting with people that need to be on site to perform their work. This includes folks in like the pharmaceutical industry. We've got a couple customers in that sector that need access to lab space and sort of critical equipment on site. And then sort of, from there, scaling up in stages. And then, one pretty consistent pattern we're seeing across almost everybody is that the target date for returning has been shifting a lot. Originally people were talking about May, then it was sort of June, now it's late summer, September, and then a lot of people are thinking about 2021 as an eventual target date. And I think one of the sort of long-term impacts of this is that you're going to see this sort of hybrid, digital remote collaboration and physical collaboration is something that will stick, I think, for many, many years to come. A second theme we've been seeing is that a lot of people have been talking about, how much space do they actually need, right, in the long term. If in the post-COVID environment, I've now learned that half my workforce can work from home effectively, and people are maybe only coming to the office a couple of days a week. What does that mean for the future of agile space and my need for sort of all the office space that I'm currently renting out? And you're already seeing some companies talk about limiting new leases and thinking about consolidating their portfolio. And I think that's something that's gonna stick as well in the long term. So yeah, a bunch of different dynamics at play there.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. I mean, even just from, we take away the kind of COVID part of this, everyone's sort of anticipating a recession, and even in that scenario, it would be likely that a lot of people would be looking to readjust their portfolio.
Yeah.
And you need, well, the best way of doing that is with data, right?
Yeah. The other sort of like other interesting sort of counterpoint that I've seen too, and this is anecdotes from a couple customers, is that like the thinking is that having spaces be sort of more agile is actually has enabled some customers to respond more effectively to this. We one client, global, Fortune 100 type company. They had offices in Asia, and then they had offices in the West, in North America and Europe. And as they were thinking about their return to work strategy, many customers are implementing kind of like we call it checkerboard in terms of the desk areas. So they go every other desk or every third desk, so no two people are sitting adjacent. And that customer was sort of already with an unassigned seating strategy in Asia. And when they had to come back and actually execute, the checkerboard return to work strategy, they were actually able to implement that a lot more easily in Asia because they had unassigned seats versus as they're looking to now do it in the US, they have an assigned seating environment. They're thinking about sort of how to stage teams. So teams come back. They don't want sort of an entire team to come back. They want to sort of stagger that, and that's more challenging to do in an assigned seating environment versus an unassigned environment. So we also think there's a little bit of a trend here that this will actually accelerate a lot of the sort of dynamic, more flexible, agile workplace strategies across the board as people kind of think about that coming back as well. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's similar things we're hearing in Europe here as well. So it makes perfect sense. I think this kind of staggered approach, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. So in terms of like transitioning back, what are some of the interesting things you've seen clients doing to prepare? What did you think they're thinking about, and what are the challenges you think? I mean, and indeed, like anyone out there who wants to share some of their challenges, feel free to put that in the chat.
Yeah, so the main one, and this maybe hits on a couple of things that we're doing is there's obviously a lot of focus on occupancy management, and there's sort of two dimensions of that. One is sort of how many people am I allowing to come back on the floor and into my buildings, and a lot of customers are again doing this sort of staggered rollout. But then the other aspect of that is measurements, right? So just because I can say that 10%, 20% of the people are quote unquote allowed to come back, how many people are actually coming back? There's going to be a lot of behavioral changes. People aren't going to feel safe necessarily on day zero. Everybody has a different commuting scenario, right? So companies that are operating in major cities in which public transportation is a big component of the workplace commute. That's a major challenge as well. And then in terms of like actually executing on the environmental changes in the office that people are thinking about, so plexiglass and additional cleaning routines and that sort of thing, what's actually happening on the floor. So one of the things that we've been doing is saying, how can we use sensor data to sort of help manage this return back? And the big thing we're looking at is sort of using data to inform what we call problem spaces in the workplace, right? So here are spaces where we're seeing excess unsafe distances, sort of like congregations of people, or spaces in the floor in which we're seeing people go above target capacity rates. And so we have this data now available in a new dashboard view in a report. And then the intention of this is that it's then shared with the facility team as part of basically a daily workflow. So on a daily basis, you get to see sort of what spaces are call it potential problem zones, red zones, and then maybe I need to check that room. I forgot to pull the chairs out. Maybe I need to sign or what have you, right? So using sensor data to monitor the physical environment and how that's influencing behavior. And then similarly, this is just sort of a different view of that. This is more of an occupant facing view, but for occupants in the floor, how can I find like a green zone, right? So an area that's at lower occupancy as well. So this is what this is showing is sort of more of a real-time view of what seats are occupied within the building, what rooms are occupied. You see green's available and red is occupied. And then as an occupant on the floor, can I then use this data to find an area of lower occupancy to go work at as well. So both an occupant facing capability as well as sort of that daily report for facility management.
Yeah, it's really nice visualization there. That kind of ties into a question, actually, one of the ones we were asked here. Would potentially going forward, is it possible then to take this data, and I know you guys have an API, don't you, that you could then incorporate maybe contact tracing data, or is there some way of getting perhaps some more human resources information about how people are and whether you could then tell if someone who says now that they're infected you've been close to them in that environment?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We don't have anybody's identity in our system, so we don't have any personally identifiable data. We know sort of there's a person sitting in this seat or there's somebody in this conference room, but we don't necessarily know who that person is. One capability that we do have in the product is the sensors all actually have Bluetooth beacons embedded inside of them. And there have been some conversations around leveraging that integrated with a mobile app that a lot of companies have mobile apps. We have a bunch of partners who provide mobile apps to the workplace, and sort of integrating that with some sort of contact tracing type flow. But there's a whole host of other considerations there around employee privacy and a variety of other issues. So that's not something that we sort of have fully fleshed out yet from a product perspective. But it's potentially possible with leveraging Bluetooth beaconing technology. But with the people counting sensor, we wouldn't be able to do any sort of contact tracing type capability.
Mm-hmm. So are there sort of one or two takeaways that you can give people about starting what they can do right now to prepare for reopening?
Yeah, I mean, so the main one is start with low tech is what we always tell people, right? So and that's obviously what most folks are doing. So physical signage, enhanced cleaning procedures, hand sanitizer availability. I mean, it really all starts there. The sort of main theme where we think we can be helpful is in sort of aggregating some of this data and then making it visible and available to both the people managing the space and then the occupants as well, to help give occupants sort of additional comfort. But like again, the key thing around that is like, what is the workflow around the data? You can measure social distancing sort of, so what are you going to do with that? And that's where, we've had a lot of that customer oriented dialogue that's really kind of, more or less coalesced on what I'm showing you here, which is this concept of like a return to work, social distancing type of dashboard in which you can see in an aggregate level how a space is performing. And then this data can be used to either reinforce communication to the workforce on sort of, whether we're doing good or bad and how can we get better, or it may be a signal to people in facility management that they need to do more with physical environmental changes to make sure the environment is safer for social distancing and for capacity management. So
So
we have
this user dashboard that might be displayed somewhere in the office or just on your, is it on the?
this is primarily intended for the facility manager.
Okay.
Yeah. So we there's been some communication with some folks around like this could maybe be more end user facing, but primarily now mostly for facility management and people in real estate as well to sort of help them understand how they're doing for the particular buildings that they're managing.
Mm. It's interesting with the school, because I know one thing I was going to ask you was how you've sort of had to adapt this technology, towards like helping with the COVID challenges. But I can, see there about this social distancing score. Like that's super interesting. How have you calculated that?
Yeah, so that basically looks at the number. So we have like kind of for all of the spaces on your floor, you have a standard capacity level, right? So a conference room is designed to support up to 12 people in the pre-COVID world, and then we've added additional fields now that you can load in both as percentages as well as just like standard capacities where maybe now that 12 person conference room should only support 3 people at a time, for example, right? Or within a large desk area, we want to maintain 6 foot of distance between people. So how many people can actually occupy that zone at a particular point in time? And then we look at all your targets, and then we say, how many times are you seeing violations against that target relative to the size of your space, and that sort of computes this single aggregate number. And then sort of the other interesting thing dynamic of that is that you can do this sort of at any level that you want. So you can do it sort of at a building level, at a floor level, at a zone level, so within a floor plan. So how is call it the top section of the floor, how's the marketing area doing versus the finance area and that sort of thing, and it can all be integrated with the seating plan and IWMS data that you have as well. So you can get sort of very granular and very high level with respect to the analytics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks great. And I think then the last section I wanted to cover with you was sort of this, what post-COVID workplace is going to look like. And then we can get on to everyone's questions. We've got quite a few queued up for you. So yeah, I mean, I'm just interested in your thoughts really on what you think the future of work looks like, at least for the next year or so.
Yeah. I think overall with COVID, we're entering a period of management, right? And sort of mitigation. So we're going to be in a period of people at some point will come back, and then there's going to be a very sort of close monitoring of that. And ultimately at some point, COVID will be behind us, and whether that's a 1-year thing or longer is, I think still very much an open question. But in this sort of mitigation phase that we're going to be in for a period of time, all the things we talked around enhanced sanitation, a lot more digital remote collaboration. We're seeing, lots of companies think about like simple things like, should I, if I have a cafeteria in the office, should I be, providing, some sort of meal credit for people at home as well, because I'm taking most of my meals at home. A lot of companies, including ours, sort of opened up a work from home budget as well, right? So, investing in additional, audio equipment, computer screen,
Yeah.
that sort of thing to have more of a home office as well. So I think like, the remote digital thing is going to be a really big thing. And then physically within the office, yes, you're going to see, I think, a lot of changes to the physical environment, a lot of emphasis on capacity management, occupancy management. You're seeing a lot of folks think about testing in the office. This is sort of a new emerging subject. We've talked to a lot of companies that are thinking about spinning up their own COVID test programs at some point. this year. So it's a very rich topic of discussion. People think about temperature checking coming into the office as well. People thinking about self-reporting of temperature checks at home and a mobile app. So there's a whole variety of sort of wellness-related items that people are considering. And I think that's going to be with us for definitely a period of time. I think the ultimate long-term impact of this is going to be kind of an acceleration of a lot of stuff that was already in motion around, digital remote work. And I'm hopeful that eventually, the red becomes a green on this slide, right? That the workplace, is going to be about driving like the physical collaboration again. And I think its purpose will be more geared around that versus, I'm showing up the office because I need to show, to show them I'm working. I think a lot of that digital physical setup balance is going to come into play over the next couple of years.
Yeah, there's some great points there. A lot really to think about, isn't it? And actually, one of the last things I wanted to ask you was around this kind of office densification trend that we've seen over the last few years. Which kind of cuts against what we're seeing now, right? Is like everyone's been trying to kind of optimize their office, fit more people into less space, but kind of now, what do you think? Is that, are we going to have to reverse that, or is it just more of there's probably going to be a mix of remote versus office working?
Yeah, there's a lot of different perspectives on this, right? So there's like one perspective, which is the amount of office space sort of is going to stay the same, but you'll have like more space per person, right? So like it's like, fixed space, but instead of like WeWork, I think was getting down to like 75 square foot per person, which is quite dense, right? And especially in this environment. The sort of thinking is that you would have, more space per person, but overall kind of same space. What I think is really going to happen is you'll see, I wouldn't even call it sort of net, densification of the workplace. What I think you'll see is sort of more of a balance, and by that I mean you may have a lot of people assigned to an office. So you might have like from a sort of densification perspective, you have many people assigned to an office, but maybe you're not going in 5 days a week. Maybe it's 2-3 days a week. Designated collaboration days where there's going to be a need for folks to be in the office for certain things. And for a lot of people that can be effective in a remote scenario, you won't be expected to come in 5 days a week anymore. But that may actually mean sort of more people assigned to sort of those big buildings, but they're just not coming in every day. So in that sense, that's why I think it will sort of, you'll see that trend around like kind of like a smarter environment continue. But the way that people think about it is less into like, we're trying to densify the office and more, and we're trying to facilitate this hybrid, remote plus in office type of experience. I also think this has some, interesting trends with like the trend towards urbanization as well. Because I think what you'll start to see is like, hey, if I don't need to come into the office every day, maybe I don't need to live 20 minutes away, right? Maybe I can afford a longer commute because I'm not going to be, thinking about doing that every day. I'm going to do it a couple times a week as opposed to before. So I think that's kind of another second order effect that you'll see from this as well. And I think that's a trend that's going to stay with us for quite a bit of time even after.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? Could be a longer term trend, definitely. Yeah, okay. So let's get to some questions. Enough from me anyway. We'll get to we'll try and get through everyone's questions here, and if we don't, as I said, like maybe you can email them when we've finished. But we've got a good 20 minutes. So one here, Dan. I guess this is specifically about your sensor platform. Is it Wi-Fi connected for data? And is the data that's sent back to the platform, I guess, is it anonymized? It's asking about GDPR.
Yeah, it's all anonymous. We get the person count data, but we don't have identity of sort of who anybody is. And then from sort of a data connectivity standpoint, we can connect both with a corporate Wi-Fi network And that's the typical model when we do sort of big deployments, thousands of units, type of deployments. Or we can also connect via these cellular gateway devices. So the sensors will connect to gateways, and the gateways can send over a cellular link back to the cloud. So you don't have to actually connect with an IT network. But both scenarios are supported. I would say the most common one is the at scale is on sort of a customer provided Wi-Fi network.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I guess everyone's sort of different, aren't they? Depending whether they want, we speak to quite a lot of companies as well who don't particularly want building automation data on the enterprise network, but yeah, it's good that you can offer both, right?
Yep.
One here again about the sensor platform. What detection angle or area does your sensor provide?
Yeah, so we think about it always from like the perspective of seating. There's a lot of like environmental factors with cubicle height and poles and that sort of thing. So one sensor per 8 desks is sort of the easiest way to estimate. And then for conference rooms, one sensor per conference room for rooms up to a dozen people. So when we do sort of like scoping without a like final floor plan or ceiling plan, that's the typical rule of thumb: one sensor per 8 desks, or one sensor per conference room or enclosed space.
And so that's part of, when you install this, then you're looking at the floor plan, and then you make the decisions based on, number of conference rooms. That's how you spec out the system.
Exactly. Yeah, we get a floor plan, a seating plan, a layout, and then that gets marked up, and that provides sort of the final estimate of the number of units in the locations. But yeah, it's all floor plan based. And then if we have reflected ceiling plans, we'll look at that too. But yeah, floor plans are usually the main way to estimate.
Next question: does the solution also provide the ability to track employees' movement, track and trace? Yeah. So I guess that ties. Go on. Sorry.
Yeah. That was sort of kind of related to the question before around sort of contact.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
So we don't, within sort of the people counting sensor, have that ability, but the units do have Bluetooth beacons embedded inside of them, and that's sort of like an optional add-on. We can sort of enable it in software, but that would require coordination with a sort of a mobile app, or sort of or other type of Bluetooth receiver, and that's not, so it's not something we can do on a standalone basis, but we have, I would say, infrastructure in the ceiling for indoor positioning location with the Bluetooth technology. So, but we can't do that, sort of on our own. We have to partner up with.
But in terms as well, like when people move around that space, can they, your sensor can detect movement, right? It knows if somebody, of course, it's anomalized, right? You don't know who it is, but you can see that people have moved position.
Yeah, you can see that. We don't know, like we just know we see a person, so we don't know it's the same person, right? So if you're sitting in desk 10, and then you go to across the floor and sit in a different desk, we'll see a person is in both desks, but we won't know it's the same person. So it's all sort of
can the alerts be sent to cleaning vendors? For example, can emails be sent once a room is vacated so it can be cleaned?
That's a great question. Let me pull up. It's a really big topic of conversation right now. So,
yeah, right. I bet.
So the answer is yes, right? So and this is the two primary things we're hearing from customers on cleaning. There's a lot more being spent on cleaning. So what we've heard anecdotally is the cleaning budgets are moving up by a factor of 3 or 4. So people are spending 3 or 4 times as much on cleaning as they used to. And what we're looking at with a lot of customers is for shared spaces, i.e. for conference rooms, the ability to, once a conference room goes from occupancy to being available, to still hold that room as sort of occupied until it's actually been cleaned. And then to have the sensor, once it detects, okay, the room is free and available now, to fire off an API into a cleaning ticketing system to then either dispatch somebody to that room to have it get cleaned, or again just hold that room until that's been done. So yes, the answer is yes. We also have this sort of concept of doing a regular report of the most frequently used spaces that do need to get cleaned as well. So, because a lot of cleaning is done is just kind of, clean the whole floor, clean everything. But when you have a fixed budget and you're trying to get leverage out of that, the ability to sort of direct those resources to the most frequently used areas is a really big thing. So there's both sort of this real-time capability as well as that kind of batch style daily or bi-daily reporting capability.
Nice. Okay. And that's what we're looking at here, right? So that red would be something that's, and it's a space that's been used a lot, which would need cleaning. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Very useful. Next question here. Do you provide time series forecasts on occupancy? So how detailed are your forecasts, I guess, if you do them? And yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's actually a really interesting question now with COVID, because like the behavior change is going to be like quite different, and how people are returning to work is quite different. We don't currently in the dashboard have that prediction capability as a feature, but it is something that is in the roadmap for release. I think we're targeting Q3 for that. But it is going to be sort of really interesting with the COVID-19 return. I think we have a slide on this here. Sorry. Yeah, which is this slide. This is kind of a planning slide. And basically what you're seeing here in that top graph is this concept of the allowed occupancy changing over time, because customers have different sort of target rates. So I'm going to allow 10%, people to come back on X day, 15% on Y day. And we want to show that sort of over time. And then you want to be able to sort of measure how you're performing against that. So there's sort of like this planning type of capability, but as far as predicting based on the historical data, that's not something that we've released yet in the product, but it is in scope for this year.
Another question here. What are you using AI for? Some machine learning or recalibration tasks?
Yeah, so the way we do there's kind of sort of two fundamental ways. One is like the way that we do the sort of detection of people is based on sort of a machine learning AI algorithm. So that's sort of something that's been developed and refined in the last couple of years. It allows us to do really accurate people count. And then the other thing that we've added, which is not really covered here, but we also have the capability, actually we kind of hit on here in this slide, to detect what's called signs of life, basically. And that's the concept of I go into a conference room and I leave my stuff in the room. I leave a laptop, I leave a coat, I leave a jacket, what have you. I'm sort of occupying that space, even if I'm not physically present in that space. And that's something that we have the ability to do with the sensors as well. So there's actually a specific machine learning model that can activate upon what we call the signs of life detection. And it's actually interesting. It's sort of the pre-COVID context. The primary use case for that was for real-time occupancy. So if I go to a seat, I leave my stuff there. I'm sort of kind of occupying that seat, and I don't want to show that seat as available to somebody else. If again, I left the jacket, I left the coat, that sort of thing. But now sort of in this even more kind of COVID context, we think about that in the context of like the meeting room cleaning type use case, right? So if a bunch of people are going in the room, they leave their stuff there, we want to know, like, is the room actually vacant, or maybe like they plan to come back before we sort of dispatch somebody to actually clean that room. So that's sort of, one way to leverage that signs of life data. But yeah, those are the two primary ways we apply machine learning within the company.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that sign of life stuff before. I think that's very useful, right? Because a lot of the time, as you said, people, especially I think in co-working and flexible spaces, people just like camp on a particular desk, don't they? And they're not really using it. But it is, it's not on or off sometimes. There is a grayness to that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, a few more questions for you. Is it possible to tag static assets to pair them with your device, thereby allowing the tracking of movement of assets through a building? So I guess not just people, but maybe, if you've got particular bits of equipment or kit, can you keep an eye on where they are?
Yeah, really, really good question. So that is something that we've looked at, leveraging the Bluetooth beacon in the product to do. Concept there being you have a Bluetooth tag on an object, like piece of equipment that you're interested in monitoring the location of, and that Bluetooth tag can then communicate with the sensor in the ceiling to sort of determine the location of that asset. We haven't fully released that yet, but sort of the infrastructure is available. So you have a Bluetooth beacon in the ceiling, but and sort of the intention is to eventually leverage that for that use case of asset tracking. But it's not something we have available today currently.
No. And quick question about floor plans. Are you importing CAD files from the customer, or are these sensor-driven layouts?
Yeah, so it's good sort of question. So hits on kind of integrations. So we have a lot of integrations, a lot of folks in the ecosystem. The most common way we do floor plan integration is either with one of our IWMS partners. So companies that are sort of already managing the floor plans. And you see a bunch of folks on here, ServiView, iOffice, Robin, Office Space Software, FM System, Spacewell, Space IQ. So there's a whole bunch of folks, and we've got great relationships on that front. We can also import the raw floor plans from the customer as well. So if we get a PDF or a DWG file, we digitize that file. We pull out all of the space IDs from the file, and sort of those are used to populate the screen. Where you see the both the floor plan, but you also see the space IDs, as well. So we have both available, and both via partners and via direct sort of integrations. The other thing we do is it's very sort of common that customers will sort of want to consume this data in other tools. So we have a lot of API integrations with these partners in which the actual sort of utilization data can be displayed within their UIs that folks already have workflows around. So
right, yeah, because there was another question here about whether you can facilitate desk booking, but of course you can, right? If you integrate with, say, a desk booking app like Robin or something like that, right? Where desk booking really common. We have a lot of customers. It's actually it's relates to kind of a theme that you're seeing return to work around moving away from like touch screens. Touch is the enemy, right? Yeah, right.
So we're seeing a lot of customers kind of rethink how they want to think about booking, and a lot more interest in mobile booking systems and mobile desk reservation systems are very, very common. We've got integrations with a variety of folks that do desk booking and room booking. So you see, a bunch in the slide, Robin, Comfy, Office Space Software, iOffice, a whole bunch of folks with good mobile offerings. We've deployed that, already, with these partners at customer locations. But mobile, I think a big trend out of this, I was actually like always a little skeptical of mobile in the office in general. Like I sort of like the sort of kiosk type model, but now with COVID, that's completely turned on its head. And I think you see a lot more mobile adoption.
Yeah, agree. One question here, is there ability to notify security, for example, if a particular zone becomes a red zone and then it can be cleared out into a safe zone real time? Yeah, that's interesting, because I guess it's like, once you know that somewhere area is overoccupied, how do you react to that, right? But it's part of the whole process.
It's a really good question. Yeah, sort of like if you have a red zone here, like sort of showing here, like a zone that's seeing over occupancy or sort of like a lot of unsafe interactions. What do you do with it? And presumably yes, you could with an API or likely an email style report send an email to security team or anybody who subscribes to that, and they could sort of react to it in real time. We are hearing from some customers this concept of like a floor ambassador, type of person who actually would be responsible for COVID-19 enforcement on the floor. So somebody's walking around and doing a bunch of things, right? Like, okay, do we have enough, hand sanitizer? Are the barriers up as we want? Are we seeing the right signage in the floor? And then, maybe they're also a person that could sort of subscribe to those alerts. But a lot of companies obviously want to balance that with their culture as well. And, do you want to actually send somebody to sort of, break up the party? Or
COVID police force.
Yeah. So there's kind of big trade-offs there. I would say the most common thing that we've been seeing is this concept of, I'm kind of showing this, if you look in the bottom right of this, an insight around, what are the problem rooms, and then maybe like that, that evening or the following morning, when somebody who's consuming this looks at this, I say, okay, I'm going to go see the problem rooms, and maybe I add a sign, or I recheck the furniture to make sure I've pulled all the chairs out of those rooms. So I would say like using the data to inform and physical environmental changes is the most popular.
Right. Or just nudging people's behavior, right? Telling them that, yeah, exactly. There's definitely loads of ways of doing these things. Comment here, at TDSI, we've developed a track and trace app for our access control software that can issue a report notifying when an area or used reader or door has been used by someone who's identified themselves as a COVID carrier. Interesting. Launching that as a free application for our software users. And a question for you, Dan. Considering that more evidence and concern over aerosolization of pathogens from COVID germs into the air that get into circulation, a property owner or manager may wish to choose a distance of, say, 8 to 10 foot, if possible, rather than minimum of 6. Can your system change minimum threshold to different distances?
Yes, yeah, you can customize that length. The default we have is 6 feet, but we have the ability to customize that to be in excess of 6 feet as well for the alerting, the average measurement perspective. Because for different types of environments and depending on sort of how our understanding of transmission evolves, you're going to want the ability to be flexible there. So that's something we have the ability to do.
Nice. Okay, I think I've got time for one more. I'm sorry, I've missed a couple of questions, so sorry if I've missed your question. But yeah, maybe you can email the guys at VergeSense if you have some burning questions you want answered. I'm sure they'll be happy to help you out. So last one, is the data real time? How often does data from your system get refreshed?
Yeah, so the sensors have a the way they work, they have a PIR motion sensor on them. So they sort of wake up when they detect motion, and then they get the person count data. So from sort of motion detection to person count data, we get that immediately. And then once they're triggered, they collect data. The default rate is once every 10 minutes. So they wake up once every 10 minutes, collect data. For it's for the battery powered device. The wired sensor can go as little as 15 seconds per reading. So that's capable of sending data quite rapidly.
That's great. Look, Dan, thanks so much for taking the time today to go through this. I think, based on the amount of questions we got and the interaction, I think it was very useful for people. So definitely appreciate you taking the time. Thanks.
Likewise. Thanks so much, Jim.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in.
Yeah, and just to finish, I know I forgot to mention it earlier and some people reminded me, we have recorded the session, so you'll be able to get that. I'll put that up online either today or tomorrow. So, through our usual channels, it'll be on YouTube. So you'll see, obviously, not just a recording, but the slides as well. And also on iTunes and Spotify as well, if you want to listen to it as a podcast. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Oh, we were, I think, almost oversubscribed. So, I mean, if you have colleagues who weren't managed to listen live, then, feel free to send them the link once it's out there. Yeah, so again, let's just say thanks everybody to listening. Really appreciate your time. And of course, thanks to Dan as well. Speak to you all later. Thank
Awesome.
you. Bye.
Thanks so much. Take care.